the forgotten biblical truths about money that unlock true prosperity and peace. Have you ever seen someone win the lottery and then completely lose their life? I have. His name was Daniel. He was a security guard working double shifts, just trying to keep food on the table. One day, he scratched a ticket on break, just for fun. And then, boom, $25 million. His life should have changed forever. And it did, but not in the way you'd expect. Within 3 years, Daniel had lost almost everything. His house, his marriage, his health, even his will to live. And before he disappeared from the public eye, I'll never forget what he told a reporter with trembling hands and tears in his eyes. Money solved none of the problems I thought it would. It made me rich, but it robbed me of peace. Now, I want you to pause and ask yourself something. If Jesus Christ himself walked up to you today and offered you a way to never worry about money again, not because you were rich, but because you were free, would you take it? Because that is exactly what this video is about. We're about to take a deep, emotional journey into the forgotten biblical truths about money, not the watered-down prosperity gospel or the shame-based views people throw around, but the radical, peaceful, and powerful way Jesus taught us to relate to money. And I promise you this, by the end of this video, you will never see money, or your own life, the same way again. Let's begin. I was sitting in a small church in Uganda, where most people walked barefoot for miles just to attend Sunday service. No sound system, no offering envelopes, just joy, real joy. That day, the pastor stood up with a tattered Bible and said something that stunned me. We are not poor, we are rich in the ways money cannot touch. And because of that, we will never lack. And I saw it. These people had almost nothing in their pockets. But they had peace, they had purpose, they had community, they gave to each other, sang louder than any cathedral choir, and welcomed me, an outsider, with warmth that broke me to tears. That moment shattered everything I thought I knew about prosperity. See, Jesus never condemned money, but he warned us about how it controls the heart. No one can serve two masters. You cannot serve both God and money. Matthew chapter 6 verse 24. He wasn't saying we should live in poverty. He was saying something even deeper. Money is a tool, not a God. And until you get that truth planted deep in your heart, you will never have peace, no matter how much you earn. Now, let's go into real life. Maybe you've been here. You're working long hours. The bills keep stacking. You're anxious. You pray for a raise. You dream of a financial breakthrough. And somehow, no matter how hard you hustle, the peace never comes. So what gives? Here's the truth Jesus taught, and most of us have forgotten. Money doesn't bring peace. Contentment does. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. Luke chapter 12 verse 15. I met a man in Texas who ran 3 businesses, drove a Tesla, had 2 vacation homes, and was quietly battling anxiety attacks in the bathroom stall of his own office. He told me, "I've built everything I thought would make me happy, but I feel empty. I'm scared my whole life is just survival in disguise." When I opened scripture with him and we read how Jesus said, "Do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink," Matthew chapter 6 verse 25, I saw something break inside him. Tears rolled down his face. "I've never felt permission to just stop chasing," he whispered. And that's the trap. Money tricks us into chasing freedom, while Jesus offers it freely. Now, let's make this personal. I want to ask you something. Right here, right now. Would you be at peace if your income never increased again, but your heart was full? Because that's what Jesus was after. Not limiting you, liberating you. In fact, one of the most revolutionary things Jesus ever said about money didn't even sound like a financial lesson. Give, and it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together and running over. Luke chapter 6 verse 38. This wasn't about transactions. It was about trust. Jesus was teaching us that prosperity flows not from hoarding, but from generosity, from trusting that the Father's provision doesn't run dry when you pour out. I'll never forget the time I gave my last $20 to a homeless man outside a diner. I had no idea how I'd get gas to make it home. But something inside me said, "Do it." As I walked back to my car, I found a crisp $100 bill tucked into my windshield. No note, no explanation. Coincidence? Maybe, but for me, it was confirmation. When we give in faith, heaven responds in kind. You see, God's economy runs differently than Wall Street's. The world says, "Get all you can." Jesus says, "Store up treasures in heaven." And what are those treasures? They're people, their peace, their purpose. They're the things you'll take into eternity when your bank account is long gone. I once visited a wealthy Christian man in his final days. He had built empires. His net worth was in the millions. But you know what he said to me with a weak smile? "All that matters now is what I gave away. Everything else, it stayed here." Let that hit you. Everything else stays here. So why do we spend our lives building empires on sinking sand? Jesus once told the story of a rich fool who stored up grain in barns, saying to himself, "Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry." But God called him out that very night, saying, "You fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you." Luke chapter 12 verse 20. That story haunts me, because it's not about punishment. It's about misplaced security. If your sense of safety, identity, and self-worth is rooted in your bank account, you are building your house on sand. But there's hope, real, revolutionary hope. Because Jesus doesn't just expose the lies we've been told about money. He gives us a blueprint for true abundance. And it begins not with how much you have, but what you believe about what you have. Here's a question that might shake you. What if you already have more than enough, but you've been blinded by a lie that says you don't? A woman I met in a refugee camp had one pair of shoes, half a Bible, and a makeshift shelter. But she had joy. She sang. She danced. She praised God. When I asked how she could be so happy, she looked at me and said, "Jesus is my treasure. Everything else is extra." That line rewired my soul. What if you lived like that? What if every dollar became a tool of love? What if every paycheck became a seed you could plant in eternity? What if money stopped being your master and started being your servant? It's possible, and in the next part of this journey, I'm going to show you how Jesus revealed 3 forgotten financial principles that could transform your entire life. Because what's coming next will challenge everything culture has taught you about success, and show you the true path to heaven-backed peace and miraculous provision. Why God sometimes withholds money, and how that delay can unlock a bigger destiny. Have you ever prayed hard for financial breakthrough and heard nothing? You tithed, you fasted, you believed, but the promotion didn't come. The debt didn't disappear. The bills kept coming. And in that silence, you probably wondered, is God ignoring me? Have I done something wrong? Why would a good father delay a blessing I desperately need? I want to share something with you that might completely reframe your waiting. I was once broke, not metaphorically. I mean, I had $17.42 in my bank account, an empty fridge, and a rent deadline that made me want to vanish. I sat in my car and yelled at God, fists pounding the steering wheel, "Where are you?" And in that moment, something unexpected happened. A whisper in my spirit, so clear it gave me chills. "I'm right here, but you're not ready for what you're asking for." At first, I was offended, but then, I understood. See, sometimes God withholds what we want in the moment, not to punish us, but to prepare us. Because here's one of the forgotten biblical truths about money. God is more concerned about who you're becoming than what you're receiving. Let me prove it to you. In Exodus, the Israelites were delivered from Egypt. They were free, but before they entered the promised land, a place flowing with abundance, what did God do? He led them through the wilderness. Why? To humble you and test you, to know what was in your heart. Deuteronomy chapter 8 verse 2. God had to detox their slavery mindset before they could responsibly handle blessing. That wilderness, that delay in prosperity? It was not rejection, it was refinement. And if you feel like you're in that same dry, stretching place, please hear me. Delay does not mean denial. God may be growing something eternal in you, a strength, a humility, a trust, that can carry far more than any financial windfall ever could. There's a reason Jesus taught more about money than almost any other topic. Because he knew, if your soul is not anchored in him, wealth will crush you. I once knew a man named Elijah who started a business with nothing but prayer and passion. But when the profits started rolling in, he got consumed. He worked 80 hours a week, missed his daughter's birthday, skipped church for deals, and slowly, the joy vanished. One day he called me, voice broken. I gained everything I prayed for, and lost the man God loved in the process. That phone call hit me like a freight train. We ask God to bless us financially, but he loves us too much to give us something that would steal our soul. So how do we prepare our hearts for true, godly prosperity? Let me give you 3 truths Jesus taught, each one radical, countercultural, and life-changing. Truth number 1. Provision follows purpose. Jesus never told his followers to chase money. He told them to seek first the kingdom of God, and all these things will be added. Matthew chapter 6 verse 33. Money is not the goal. Mission is, and when your heart is aligned with God's purpose for your life, provision follows you, like a shadow, like gravity. I've seen this over and over. I once met a young woman named Grace who gave up a 6-figure job to work in inner-city ministry. Her parents thought she was crazy, but in the first year, donors came out of nowhere. Her rent got paid miraculously. Food would show up on her porch. She wasn't chasing money, she was chasing calling. And God backed her purpose with provision. Are you doing what you were created for? Or are you trading your purpose for a paycheck? Because money that comes without calling will never satisfy. Truth number 2. Generosity is the gateway. Jesus flipped everything upside down when he said, "It is more blessed to give than to receive." Acts chapter 20 verse 35. Most people wait until they feel rich to start giving. But Jesus said, start now, start small, start with what you have. Because when you give, you declare war on greed. I knew a teenager named Jonah who had a part-time job making minimum wage. Every month, he gave 10% to his church, another 10% to a local food pantry. One day I asked him why. He shrugged and said, "It keeps my heart clean." Clean. Do you understand the power of that? In a world obsessed with more, Jonah learned the secret Jesus taught. You don't give because you have abundance. You have abundance because you give. In fact, Proverbs chapter 11 verse 25 says it clearly. A generous person will prosper. Whoever refreshes others will be refreshed. You want to feel alive again? Start giving like your peace depends on it. Because it does. Truth number 3. Peace comes from surrender. We think money will finally bring rest. But Jesus taught something wild. Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Matthew chapter 11 verse 28. Did you catch that? He didn't say, "Come to wealth." He said, "Come to me." Because rest doesn't flow from riches. It flows from relationship. When you surrender your need to control money, when you stop seeing it as your savior and start seeing Jesus as your provider, something unlocks. You breathe again. You sleep better. You stop being haunted by, "What if?" I've seen multimillionaires racked with anxiety. I've seen single moms on food stamps glowing with peace. The difference? Surrender. And that surrender, while terrifying at first, is the gateway to true prosperity. One time, I gave away my entire savings to help build a water well in a village that had never had clean drinking water. I didn't know how I'd pay rent next month. But the miracle came. A stranger emailed me out of nowhere, said God told him to send me a check. It covered everything, and more. I've never forgotten that moment. Because I realized something that day. Money is not my source. God is. And when He is your source, you'll never live in fear again. Now, let me ask you a dangerous question. What would happen if you actually lived like everything belonged to God, and you were just managing it for a short time? That's not theory. That's biblical stewardship. Jesus told a parable about a master who gave bags of gold, called talents, to his servants. He didn't say, "Keep it safe." He said, "Put it to work." The one who buried his money was called wicked and lazy. Why? Because he operated from fear, not faith. Some of us are burying our blessings, hoarding, hiding, hoping we don't lose what little we have, and in doing so, we cut ourselves off from the multiplied blessing that only comes through bold, faith-filled obedience. So here's the shift. You are not an owner. You are a steward. And the moment you embrace that, money loses its grip on your soul. You become bold, free, fearless. I want to challenge you with something right now. Pick a day this week and give in a way that scares you a little. Not recklessly, but sacrificially. Maybe it's to your church. Maybe it's to a stranger. Maybe it's to that friend who's quietly struggling but too proud to ask. Do it anonymously if you have to. But do it. Because giving is how we break the chains that money wraps around our hearts. And that's where true peace begins. Now, in the final part of this journey, I'm going to show you something that could change the way you walk with God for the rest of your life. A forgotten promise Jesus made. A financial principle so bold, so counterintuitive, so divine, that if you actually believe it, it can transform your future forever. Jesus' final money secret that the church rarely talks about, and why it could supernaturally unlock everything you've been praying for. There's a moment in Scripture that nearly every Christian reads, but few ever live. It's subtle, hidden in plain sight. Jesus is standing in the temple, watching people put their offerings in. Rich people walk up, dropping in bags of gold, polished and proud. But then, a poor widow walks in. She puts in 2 tiny copper coins, nothing compared to the others. And Jesus stops everything. He calls his disciples over and says something that explodes every worldly idea we've ever had about money. Truly I tell you, this poor widow has put more into the treasury than all the others. They gave out of their wealth, but she, out of her poverty, gave everything. Mark chapter 12 verses 43 to 44. That right there is the final, forgotten secret about money Jesus wants you to know. Heaven doesn't measure giving by how much you give. It measures it by how much it costs you. The rich gave leftovers. The widow gave trust. And that trust? That surrendered, raw, vulnerable trust? That's the kind that moves heaven. Some of the most miraculous financial breakthroughs I've ever witnessed didn't come from people who had it all together. They came from people who said, "God, I trust you, even when it looks impossible. Let me tell you a story that still gives me chills. There was a man named Raphael who lost everything during a financial crash. Business gone, savings wiped, even his car repossessed. He came to church one night, broken, barely holding on. During the offering, he reached into his coat pocket. All he had was a single dollar. Not a metaphor, one literal dollar bill. He stared at it, shook his head, then, with tears in his eyes, walked up to the basket and placed it in. Later that week, a man who didn't even know him overheard his story at a coffee shop. That stranger ended up connecting Raphael to a job, which led to a career, which led to him starting a nonprofit that now feeds over 10,000 children annually in Latin America. From $1. But not just any dollar. It was a faith dollar, a trust dollar. It was Raphael saying, "This is all I have, God, but you're all I need." And heaven answered. See, Jesus never said money was evil. He said the love of money is what corrupts the soul. He wasn't trying to shame us. He was trying to free us. Because when you trust God like that widow did, like Raphael did, you enter a realm that logic can't touch. Give, and it will be given to you, pressed down, shaken together, running over. Luke chapter 6 verse 38. Jesus never promised we'd all be rich. But he did promise that our needs would be met, that we'd have peace, that we'd have purpose, that if we lived with open hands, heaven would respond with open doors. So let me ask you, are your hands open, or are they clenched in fear? Because clenching says, I have to protect what I have. But opening says, I trust God to multiply what I give. Let's take it deeper. In Matthew chapter 17, Jesus and Peter need to pay the temple tax. They don't have the money. What does Jesus do? He tells Peter to go catch a fish. Inside that fish's mouth is a coin, exactly enough to pay the tax. Can we just pause? Jesus pulled tax money out of a fish's mouth. That's not just a miracle. That's a message. He's saying, I know where the resources are. Even when you don't, I can provide in ways you can't even imagine. And the condition? Trust, obedience, listening when it sounds crazy. Because real prosperity doesn't come from the stock market, your salary, or even your savings. It comes from walking so closely with God that when He says, cast your net, you obey, no matter how unlikely it seems. I want to challenge you with this. What if God is asking you to take a step that doesn't make financial sense, but makes faith sense? Maybe it's quitting that toxic job you've clung to for false security. Maybe it's starting that ministry or business that's been burning in your heart for years. Maybe it's giving in a way that stretches you, so that God can stretch through you. The widow's story didn't end with 2 coins. That's just where her legacy began. And yours can start today. Let me leave you with 3 simple steps, based on Jesus' teachings, that can unlock a life of true prosperity and peace, starting right now. Step 1. Audit your heart, not just your bank account. Jesus said, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Matthew chapter 6 verse 21. So here's a personal reflection. If someone looked at your spending, what would they say your heart truly values? Is it generosity or status? Is it helping others or just helping yourself feel safe? When you start aligning your heart with kingdom values, your wallet naturally follows, and that alignment brings peace. Step 2. Practice radical gratitude for what you already have. Gratitude is a magnet for abundance. Jesus took 5 loaves and 2 fish, and instead of complaining, He gave thanks. That act of gratitude triggered multiplication. Thousands were fed. What if your miracle is waiting on your thankfulness? Take time every day to thank God not just for what you want, but for what you already have. Even if it's small, especially if it's small. Step 3. Give boldly. Receive freely. You don't need to hoard when you trust God as your source. Jesus said, "Freely you have received, freely give." Matthew chapter 10 verse 8. You were never meant to be a reservoir. You were meant to be a river. Let what flows into your life flow through your life. Because generosity doesn't reduce your resources, it multiplies your impact. And here's the wild part. Peace is the real prosperity. That's what Jesus offers you. Not just a better paycheck, but a better heart. Not just more stuff, but a soul that sleeps well at night. Not just the power to buy more, but the power to bless more. So right now, I want to ask you something that could change your entire future. What is God calling you to release, so He can release something greater in return? Maybe it's fear. Maybe it's greed. Maybe it's a belief that you'll never have enough. Whatever it is, let it go. Because when you release your grip on money, you open your hands to receive everything heaven has been waiting to pour into your life. Jesus didn't die so you could struggle in survival mode. He rose so you could live in spirit-filled abundance. Not abundance measured in dollars, but in peace, joy, purpose, and power. That's the kind of wealth the world can't steal. That's the kind of prosperity no inflation can touch. And that's the promise Jesus made to you. So take the step. Trust again. Give again. Live open-handed. Because the forgotten biblical truths about money? They aren't just truths. They're keys. Keys that unlock a life of peace, purpose, and unshakable prosperity. And now that you have those keys, what will you open? Jesus once said, "What good is it for someone to gain the whole world, yet forfeit their soul?" Mark chapter 8 verse 36. You can chase the world, or you can follow the one who created it. The world says get rich. Jesus says, get free. Which one are you really chasing?